what exactly is the secret to building great products? At Venturies Inc., we believe it is a combination of product thinking and a mindset encompassing focus, adaptability, mojo, and engagement that we call the Venturies mindset. Join us on Venturies Stories as we demystify this through conversations with industry leaders. This is the Venturies Stories with your hosts, Gaurav and Arjun. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Venturies Stories. As our regular listeners know, we love to talk about building great products, product thinking, mindset, and why having a very strong culture and a strong team is at the core of building great products. Today, we have a guest who can talk about all of these topics through her varied experiences. So our guest today is Namrata Sarmah, or Nam. She is a Chief Product and Technology Officer, a keynote speaker, and regularly advises large publicly held enterprises as well as PE-backed, venture-backed startups and scale-ups. So she's got a diverse set of experiences across technology and product, and we are excited about this conversation. Besides all of this, she is also actually the founder of two communities, Women in Product and CPO Track. I have the pleasure of being part of the CPO Track community, and I love the community. It is awesome. So we'll get into all of these topics through the course of this conversation today, and looking forward to it. But before we do that, Nam, welcome to the show. It is a pleasure to have you here. Let's maybe get started with a brief introduction, your career journey, and maybe some highs and lows.
Thank you so much, Gaurav. You've summarized it very well. So yes, I mean, my career started. So I've done my undergrad in computer science, which is representative for like half of India, probably. So I come from a family of engineers. My dad was an engineer as well. So yeah, just like most kind of Indian kids, I think only had two options. You either become an engineer or a doctor. And I did not want to study forever, so I did engineering, and graduated in 2007. So studied in Chennai, which is a city in India, and worked at Wipro, which was my first company, was first employer in Bangalore. Loved working there. Still have friends from Wipro. Really formative years for me. I think I was very fortunate to have amazing bosses, amazing managers, but also amazing colleagues. I think who really supported me throughout. So worked there for a few years and had the opportunity to be in Boston as well, Gaurav, where you are.
Yep.
Very early career. So my client was actually EMC Corporation that time, which is Dell now. So I was at Westboro as a small place. That's where I think EMC was that time. Several buildings they had. So I had a good fortune of spending some time there at the client place. And I was all set to actually study in the US as well. I wanted to do my MBA. So I wrote my GMAT from the US whilst I was in Boston, and it was all set to actually study there. But then my boyfriend at that time proposed me, and he was in the UK. So, so life completely changed. And I think when we did the pros and cons, I kind of UK won that battle. So I moved to the UK and did my MBA here in Manchester Business School. I graduated in 2012 and changed directions really. So from a technical, kind of pure technical role, moved into product management. And product management in 2012, 2013 in the UK was very nascent stages. It was really not a proper discipline. There was no real kind of definition even of what a PM does. But I plunged into it. I liked the unknown. I think I was the only person in my entire batch who did not work in the big four or investment banking. MBA those days were very, I don't know how it is now, but at that point, things were very like quite, it was almost like if you do an MBA, you either go into consulting, so you join one of the big four, big five management consulting firms, or you become an investment banker. So there were only kind of two options really. So I was quite an outlier. I did not want to do any of those things. Definitely not banking. It's just, I don't think I have the personality for that. So I was really an outlier. And I think my career services people at Manchester Business School, who I'm still close to, were worried about me because they were like, okay, so, have to create a whole new career for you now. And I was like, I'll find it. I'll find it. So I got very lucky. I got to do the internship at Kellogg's, which is an FMCG company. So had good beginnings, and I think that then kind of led to other roles as well. So went into product quite early on, I would say. So it's been almost more than 10 years now, I think, in product management. But I progressed very fast. So I became a CPO within 8 years of product management career. So happened I got rapidly promoted, and kind of within a very short span of time got to do a lot of things, and worked in different sectors as well. So worked in broadcast media, worked in healthcare, education. I would say health and education are very close to my heart just because they are highly impactful. But from a fun perspective, I think I love media. I love broadcast media. Would go back to it in a heartbeat. And yeah, so we kind of, my husband and I settled here in London and started our lives here. And I've got two sons. And I think along the way, especially when I became a CPO, is when I thought I'll give back to the community, which has helped me so much. So that's when I started Women in Product UK, which has grown a lot now. And then very recently, I would say 6 months ago, I started CPO Track, only because I just saw a market gap
Mhm.
in leadership communities, especially in the UK and Europe. So started it. And so far so good. It's been amazing, and I know you're a member as well. So I'm really really glad that we met.
Yep.
And yeah, I do a lot of advisory and stuff, but yeah, we can talk about that later.
Wow, man, that's fantastic. I mean, I was just listening to your commentary, and I was like, I was making some notes, and I was like, I'll come back to it, but I'll come back to the last one where you talked about market gap and the market gap, and you filled it with what we like to talk about as product market fit, as how
Yes.
you go from you identify an opportunity and you see, well, how do I fit into it, and your CPO track that you've been driving is pretty amazing. And I just was looking at my notes and I said, you follow your heart, which was
Yeah.
your transition from US to UK.
Yeah. Yeah.
You take a hell of a lot of risk. I mean, I'm looking at your career path and seeing all these kind of things, and you're highly adaptive to change. I mean, so that's just incredible. I mean, if you look at those three things, at how you follow your heart, you're taking so much risk, and I want to bring this back and just have this transition. Talking about products, and you've been leading products domains in education, healthcare, broadcast media, as you love. FMCG, which is fast moving consumer goods. A lot of people don't know these acronyms at some place. You've also been leading, product teams and global corporations. I mean, but just to drill it down to some of our
Yeah.
listeners, just how do you think about great products? I mean, how do you think about building great products? How do they make an impact across these very diverse segments? And when you
Yeah.
think about it from your hat,
Yeah.
and say, well, when I think of a great product, I think of X or Y, and when I start designing this with my teams, etc., what do I think about? What's your kind of thought process for that?
I think a great product is something that solves a real human problem. I'll give you an example. When I just finished my MBA here, in 2012, and I had taken a loan, obviously education loan, and I had to obviously pay it back. So, and I was earning. I got a job pretty quickly, so I was earning, and I was, paying my bank back in India, which is an international transfer, obviously.
Mhm.
And this is 2012, 2013, right? And you'll be surprised, there were not that many services that could enable an
Sure.
international transfer like that on a monthly basis. I searched for so many different services. It was just kind of, it wasn't great enough. And I remember I saw in London tubes, in the trains, a little poster of a company called TransferWise.
Uh-huh.
Yeah,
Wise.
and this is 2012, right? And I was in the tube, and it said like TransferWise, and it's like, yeah, you can do this in few minutes and blah blah blah, right? And just typical startup. And it was risky, right? Because how many people are going to just look at something at the tube and actually try it? Well, I did try it because I love taking risks. And I remember the first kind of transfer I did. I think it was to my mom's account, and it was like £10 or something because it was just a trial, right? And I could lose that £10 very easily. But that's fine. We did it, and she actually received it in a matter of few hours. And I remember that phone call, and she's like, yeah, I received it. Yeah, it's real money. Yeah, I got it. It's in my account. So I was like, oh, it works. Like, yeah, it works. So started using that every month for my kind of bank transfer, for my loan amount, right, to repay that, and never looked back. Never looked back to any traditional way of doing it anymore. So for me, that is one of the most tangible ways of how a certain product, relatively unknown back then, right? They never had a brand, nobody knew them, but a small little company, a small product, could solve actually a big problem. It was a
Hmm.
big problem. Now think about the number of international students who would use something like that, isn't
Hmm.
it? So, and I obviously, when I was using it, I spoke about it. I told at least 10, 15 people about it. So you can imagine that
Yep.
advocacy, the kind of evangelism that happens when a product actually helps you in your life, right? So for me, I think that's a great definition of, of a good product.
Hmm. Yep.
By the way, I mean, you touched on something which is very close to my heart before Gaurav jumps in, is that why is, and I probably looked at it at the same time as you did, and
Yeah,
I did the same kind of £10, $10
yeah,
equivalent kind of thing at that time. Why is it now probably a 7 billion, $8 billion
yeah.
company, right? It's just a phenomenal,
Hmm.
space that they created in a
Yeah,
vacuum, right? So, and that's when you talk about product market fit, how do you get there and how do you start designing a product to that tune that?
Hmm.
yeah,
Now, one of the things that we'll talk about in a few minutes is that it was just not finding the right product and creating it, but that user experience, which was damn
yeah.
Yep.
simple. It was the
Yep.
Very true.
easiest thing to do. Like,
Yeah, yeah,
when
yeah,
you
yeah,
think about it and you're sending a loan back or sending it to your mom or
yeah,
whoever else it is, it needs to be that frictionless that
yeah,
allows you to give that, it just be end to end, just takes
yeah,
you 30 seconds, not more.
yeah,
And, the simplicity of it, the user experience of it comes into it. But we'll talk about that more. But
Yeah.
let's keep going.
yeah,
Yeah, and that is actually awesome. The user experience theme, that's one of the things that this podcast is called Navigating the Art
yeah,
of Product Thinking. And one of the things about product thinking is user centricity, user experience.
yeah,
And you've touched upon it. That's sort of the secret of building great products. And actually, now drawing that analogy back to your other hat of building communities. As we discussed,
yeah,
I am a member of CPO Track. I'm a member of other communities as well. I love CPO Track in terms of actually the ease of use, the user experience, as well as the type of community and the quality of connections that I have developed through
yeah,
CPO Track. And as I think through it, and with the current age era of AI, everybody talks about
yeah,
the AI, and people are talking about whether the AI hype is dying down or not.
yeah,
And it is interesting. Arjun and I are both huge Gen AI enthusiasts. But one of the things that we talk about is while yes, AI is going to change lives and everything, but the output is as good as the input. People talk a lot
yeah,
about curating the output and things
yeah,
like that, and spending a lot of time curating the output. But just like when you're building a product, you do not want to build a lot of technical debt. You want to curate it
yeah,
right in the beginning, and then something good will come out. So that's what we feel is the AI hype has to get to that stage where the models, the input gets curated and then becomes useful. And you don't have to spend a lot of cycles on trying to curate the output.
yeah,
And I kind of draw a parallel to the experience that I get out of CPO Track, and the simplicity of that, whether it's through the WhatsApp group or other
yeah.
forums that you host. So would love to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, no, I mean, the thing is, I never, I just think the power of like human relation is, first of all, is evergreen. I don't think AI can actually replace it.
Mhm.
And in fact, it's the opposite. I feel like if we are really venturing into the AI world or AI era, let's say, and if you see lots of automation now in companies in the next 5 years, if you see like half of the jobs have been taken over by AI or whatever, actually more and more human skills are going to be in vogue. Like that will be
Mhm.
in demand, actually.
Mhm.
So even like I know the CEO of NVIDIA said this, I think recently as well, that like computer science was like one of the hottest subjects to study in the last kind of 20, 20, 30 years even,
Mhm.
because if you have a CS degree, you're going to get a good job, you will have a comfortable life. Like certain things are actually guaranteed. I would like to say at least. But I think moving forward, if tech becomes a commodity, which it has become already,
Mm-hmm.
and AI will make it more and more of a commodity, then probably you don't need that many engineers anymore. You probably need people who are more into the human skills, because I think there will be a human skill gap, you know. People will probably be more kind of lacking in human connections and relationships and whatnot, and they will need more help with that
Mm-hmm.
actually, rather than technical things. So for me, I think community building is actually very personal for me. I do believe, I think it's a very important aspect of human life in general. And I also feel like it really enhances you overall, like not just as a professional, but also personally as well. Like at CPO Track, for example, and you know this, Gaurav, a lot of our conversations, it's actually not work related.
Yes.
Talk about all sorts of things. You talk about stock market. There's like a bunch
Mm-hmm.
of jokes being shared on a daily basis. You talk about people talk about their experiences with investments or things, or even cars or whatever. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Just random. We talk about kids, of course. You know, so it's like it's again bringing your whole human self to
Mm-hmm.
the community. I also feel that in the last kind of 5 to 10 years, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. Is I feel like corporate culture has kind of died,
Mm-hmm.
especially after COVID, with remote working and everything. I think what's happened is um, going to work. I just don't know. A lot of, and with all these layoffs that's happening as well, work is just not fun anymore. I think people have also lost trust. It's just like I think there's a lot of kind of lack of trust or
Mm-hmm.
loss of trust, sorry, especially in big tech, right? Like I know people who've worked many years in fangs and then they've been let go in a matter of
Yep.
seconds, right? So there is a lot of kind of people who have lost trust, I
Yep.
think, in their employers and just corporate culture in general. Now what that means is historically the kind of relationships that you used to build at work, people are looking for that outside now, you know and
Mm-hmm.
that's why communities have become very important.
Mm-hmm.
Like my two best friends are my colleagues from Wipro,
Mm-hmm.
and we became friends on our induction day. One was right hand side, one was the left hand side of me, and those two are still my best friends. Now I don't think today's employees, like if you're a 22-year-old,
Mm-hmm.
I don't think they will find their two best friends in their
Yep.
first job.
Mm-hmm.
It's completely changed, right? Now, people still need friends, right? Especially if you're senior. The
Mm-hmm.
more senior you get, the more lonely you are.
Yep.
You cannot share a lot of things with people around you. And that's where you need relationships. You know what I mean?
Yep.
So I
Yep.
feel like CPO, I built CPO track very much focused on that relationship building. Because once you build relationships, everything happens as part of it. Like it's so much easier to do business
Mm-hmm.
when you know somebody personally, you know? And if you think a group of 500, almost 500 people now, right?
Yep.
This is
Mm-hmm.
500 director and above people globally. It's not a joke.
Yep.
The net worth of that group is very high. Now, if you think these 500 people, if they just do business within each other, you don't really need anybody else.
Yep.
So it's highly powerful. So that
Mm-hmm.
was kind of my vision.
I was just listening to all your thoughts, and it was just really interesting to and I always try to put a kind of parameter around it so
Yeah,
that we have a way to kind of think about it. So I think what I heard you say was that, hey, there are great products, and that you talked about TransferWise as an example,
yeah,
and there's users and customers at the other end of it, which we are trying
yeah,
to connect that with a product market fit. But then you brought in a very interesting concept, which is the environment and the context matters. The
Mm-hmm.
yeah,
environment and the context of how you engage, whether you're a Gen Xer or you're a Gen Z, as an
yeah.
example. So if you're an average 22-year-old and your kids are much smaller, which I don't know what they become, like they're a Gen, XYZ
Alpha,
or
they're
what,
Gen Alpha. Yeah,
Gen
Gen
Alpha,
Alpha.
right?
yeah,
So and that environment and context keeps changing, and we
yeah,
and you talked about Jensen Wang as an example, and talking about AI and the impact of AI in the workspace, and it's changing. It's changing us. Our environments are changing, and how we
yeah,
deal with that environment is changing. So, and that's really part of the context of when we talk about great teams and great culture.
yeah.
Uh, how it, building great product is, of course, an outcome, but
Yes.
that team and that culture, and Gaurav and I have gone through this entire episode like twice and thrice in our lives, where we started from scratch. We built a team from scratch,
Yeah.
and we've found we use the word mojo more than culture, but it means
Yeah.
the same similar
Mm-hmm.
things. That
Yeah.
that culture aspect becomes a
Yeah.
very critical factor of
Yeah.
not just the water cooler talk and your two best friends from Wipro
Yeah.
as an example, but how do you create that context for these individuals such that they can aspire as well as deliver much more than what they are individually capable of, right? So that's the part. And I'd love to get your thoughts because you're going on this entire thing, and I'm just listening to you, and I'm going, wow, that's something very powerful. I mean, that's when you talk about friends from your first workplace, when you talk about how you're building the CPO track today, what's that magic sauce? That how do you create that culture which all of us can learn from as well as build great products from?
I think that's a great question. I think it's leadership, like very hands-on leadership. I think if you're building a company, let's say, if this was like a tech startup that I was building, let's say hypothetically, as a founder, as a leader, I would be super hands-on about my product,
Mm-hmm.
right? I
Mm-hmm.
would probably be talking to, obviously customers every day, customers or users every day, but I would also be a heavy user of my own product. So
Mm-hmm.
I think you have to do both, right? So I think being extremely hands-on is very important because I feel like the more you outsource some of these things, you're basically compromising on the quality. So if
Mm-hmm.
I had two choices, so one is do hyperscale. Like, why do you have 500 people? Get 50,000 people and hire a team of 20, 30 kind of little nams who can help or whatever. So that's option one. The second option is scale it up to kind of 1,000 organically, but you be the voice and the face
Mm-hmm.
and the brain and everything behind it. I would go for option two any day,
Mm-hmm.
because option one is going to break the essence of the community,
Mm-hmm.
right? And it might, and also the community might become a commodity in that
Mm-hmm.
process, and I
Yeah.
don't think any of us want to join a commodity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's actually, I think, even for a product journey, how it goes
Yeah,
from initial innovation to scale
yeah,
up and then eventually becomes a commodity. I think, yeah, there are probably parallels here.
yeah,
So, one other thing that I wanted to touch upon, you do leadership, mentoring, coaching as
yeah,
well. And I think we have already talked about the mindset and the leadership
yeah,
philosophy and things like that. I'd love to, and Arjun touched upon this. We talk about this thing called Venture's mindset, which is about focus, adaptability, mojo, and engagement,
yeah,
which we believe is the secret for building great teams, as well as it all starts with the leadership. When you drive those values, the culture permeates through the organization,
yeah.
and it happens. I would love to hear your thoughts as you engage with people in leadership and mentoring. If there's anything else that you've not already covered in terms of leadership mentoring that you would like to share?
Honestly, I think a lot of people are gonna get offended by this, but I feel like there are so many bad leaders out there, so many bad leaders. And actually, being a good leader is it's quite easy because the bar is so low. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I feel like, unfortunately, there's not that many good leaders around
Mhm.
us.
Yep.
Whether you like it or that's just the reality, right? You look at big listed companies in the world or even mid or whatever. Just look
Yep.
around you.
Mhm.
Even people you might have worked with. There's not that many good leaders, just to be honest. So I feel like, being a good leader is actually the bar is so high, so low that even if you do something quite simple, you can actually have a massive impact on kind of people around you. So first of all, I think it's pretty easy to be a good leader because there's too many bad ones around. And the second thing is, I feel like leadership has also changed, Arjun, and you said this about the context, right? It's all about context. Because I feel like, and COVID has changed a lot of things. The
Mhm.
dynamic of relationship, I think leadership, I think COVID has changed. Because up until then, I was mostly worked in kind of very large companies, and I know both of you worked in, really large corporates. And some of these corporates, the way it works is, people at the C-suite, and these I'm talking about billion-dollar companies, right? Several billions, worth of several billions, listed businesses. A lot of times, people don't even know who the CEO is really.
Mhm.
They might have seen the CEO at a video call in some town hall or
Mhm.
at a big stage talking to the employees, 100,000 employees or whatever. But there's no personal
Yep.
relationship. Like there's no personal conversation with the CEO as such, right? um, and they have their big corner offices and you don't even know where they are. With COVID, obviously, suddenly the world became very digital, right? People lost their corner offices, a lot of people lost their EAs as well. And then all of a sudden, everybody has to use a Slack or a Teams or whatever, right? Some collaborative tool. And believe it or not, in very large companies, right, the exec team actually never uses these things. They would never use a Slack or a Teams or whatever, right? The employees use it, but like the top people, they just don't use it. But with COVID, everybody had to use it. So
Mhm.
suddenly you're able to Slack the CEO of a company worth $100 billion or whatever, right? So I think that changed dynamic a lot. So COVID actually has been a massive game changer in many ways from a comms perspective. I also feel that the generations are different now. You've got Gen Z. We can do a whole podcast focus on them. But they've got Gen Z now in the workplace who have a very different motivations in life, very different ambitions. I'm millennial myself. I think Alpha is going to be very different, which are kind of my kids' generations. So I think every generation also they expect different types of leadership. You
Mhm.
know what I mean?
Yep.
So, like if you ask Gen Z, what are your motivations in life? They probably wouldn't say, I want to buy a great big house or whatever. They might probably say, oh, I want to achieve work-life balance or something. Or they might say, oh, I want to work from anywhere or whatever. It's very different, right? Even my generation, I mean, even millennial, I think we were brought up with quite traditional values. You work
Mhm.
because you want to earn good money, you want to provide for your, family and things like that. So I feel like leadership has changed a lot and it will continue changing. But it's changed because I think the expectations from a leader is very different today versus 10 years ago, I would say.
Mhm.
So again, very interesting thoughts. I love the fact that, and I'll go back to your previous commentary about hyperscale versus individual orientation.
Yeah.
And you lean towards the individual orientation just so that that context shares and you
Yeah.
can drive that 500x. And before we started recording, you talked about your child being 500x. Now you know where he gets it from, right? And then I think you shifted gears into this leadership model. And yes, Gaurav and I will agree with you wholeheartedly. There are more bad leaders than the good ones. There are many more. But, but having said that, I'll speak for myself. I'm sure Gaurav agrees with this. Is that the few good leaders make
Yeah.
so much of great impact.
Yep.
The
Yep.
few good leaders, yes, the bar is low, but the few good leaders that I have been involved with my career have made a massive impact to
Mhm.
the personality that I have, the way that we kind of come across, how we lead our teams
Mhm.
has
Yeah.
had that impact. So, yes, I mean the goal for us is to be
Yeah.
associated with these good leaders and make sure that whether you're
Yeah.
entering the workforce, whether you're in the middle of the workforce or you're leading teams, is that how do you emulate the people that you respect and you find that good leadership skills and push behind. I'm gonna push off on this one topic. You said your title was a CPTO, and I
Yeah.
always get how the technology side of you and the product side of you, how do that two sides of that same
Yeah.
coin kind of interact with each other? How do you deal with the technology orientation and the product delivery from a customer standpoint? How does that one individual manage that kind of almost a schizophrenic kind of approach, right? So not to put a negative tone to it, but a positive tone. How do you deal with it? I mean, that's just incredible, right?
I think there's a few. I think it's a skill question. Actually, this is more of, I think. See, the thing is, I think if you come from a technology background, so let's say a computer science background, and you've been a developer yourself, of course you understand. You're technical enough to understand good and bad tech strategies or tech decisions, right? I can do that. I can easily decide a tech strategy for a company or what the tech stack should be for it to be scalable or something. I can do that. I don't need an advisor for that. I can do that myself. Let's say if my undergrad was in, I don't know, fine arts, let's say,
Mhm.
and I was a literature student, then I got thrown into product management because product management is like what you can come from any discipline, right?
Yep.
Into product. Would I be a CPTO? Of course not. I don't think so. I don't think I would have the skill to do a CPTO role. There could be outliers. There's always outliers. You'll always have edge cases, right? But I think as somebody with a computer science background, it's quite natural for you to think to be quite strong technically. So I think from a company perspective, especially in today's economy, we don't live in that zero interest rate era anymore, isn't it? And money is expensive now. It's not cheap
Mhm.
anymore. And if you're like a board and you're looking at your executive team, right, and how many people are there and how much they cost, you will think about consolidation.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm seeing, and it's not just about CPO, CTO. I'm seeing, at least in the UK, we are seeing consolidation of CCO, CMO
Mm-hmm.
quite a lot.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, recently I saw a company who've consolidated CFO, COO as
Mm-hmm.
well,
Yep.
actually. Quite unique. So there's a lot of things going on in the market. It could be because of the kind of market we are in, and maybe in a few months' time, things will again decouple, But at the moment, I think this is happening, and I don't think it's a very hard dynamic, especially. I mean, it really depends. Now, look, if I can I be a C, will I go for a CTO role, a standalone CTO role? No, I don't think so.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't. I don't think I'm qualified for that anymore, only
Mm-hmm.
because I changed my path, right? Now, would I be a CPTO of a very, I don't know, like a API company or something, right?
Mm-hmm.
I don't think so. Honestly,
Mm-hmm.
I would, I'm just not qualified for that. Or like an AI company. I don't think so. But it is pretty easy for me to be a CPTO of an e-commerce business. It's pretty easy for me to be a CPTO of an online platform that delivers education, right? Or let's say a booking platform or a marketplace. So I think for those type of companies, the CPTO role makes 100% sense.
Mm-hmm.
But if it is a very technical company, then I think keeping the roles separate might be better.
Yep. Yeah, very well said. Actually, it goes back to something that Arjun and I like to talk about, called talent and mindset. So I think it's talent or skills and mindset. If you have both, you can do the role. If you don't, then and the company needs very heavy skills, have two individuals, but reduce the friction. And then based on, you touched upon the market dynamics, which it leads to consolidation. We see that as well. And that
Yeah.
makes you want to have only so many decision makers on the table at the end of the day. So as I went through your website, you talk about books and some of the books that have influenced you. Arjun and I love to talk about sports and books as part of this podcast. For sports,
Yeah.
from what you and I have interacted, I gather I have to talk to your husband more than you. So we'll invite him over for a podcast maybe and talk about sports. But would love to get your recommendation for books that have influenced you. Anything that you would like to share with our listeners?
Yeah, well, so very well read since childhood. I think yeah, I read a lot of books. It's a lot of them are mentioned, I think, on my website. But I think in terms of books that have really made a mark, I do like to read biographies, autobiographies of great leaders. So I loved reading what was that? Ride of a Lifetime by
Mm-hmm.
Bob Iger. It's a really good book, especially the last few pages where I think there's like 20 things that he talks about that a leader must do. I mean, again, these are amazing books, right? So that is one book I would recommend. I loved reading My Life in Full by Indra Nooyi, who's also my one of my role models, I would say. Very
Mm-hmm.
similar. I think, I mean, I'm not from the south of India, but very similar childhood. Actually, her grandfather was a judge. My grandfather is from the Indian police service. So similar upbringing, many ways, family structure wise, very academic and things like that. So I could find a lot of, similarities. Strict mom, for example. So strict moms give birth to women like myself. So I think strict parents are not a bad thing after all. But I think there's one book in terms of business book, I would say Discover Your True North
Mm-hmm.
uh, by Bill George, Professor Bill George from Harvard Business School. It's one of the 25, I think it's one of the top 25 best leadership books of all time. It's a very good book. It's actually a pre-reading for HBS MBAs, I think, because I did a course with HBS for leadership program 4 years ago, just before COVID. It was a few weeks, and it was residential, so it was from at HBS. And I remember the winter of 2019, just before Christmas, I got this beautiful package full of books. It was the pre-reading. That's HBS way of welcoming you. It's like, hey, it's Christmas. Please read these 5 books. So I got like 4 or 5 books, which were pre-reading because the course was in February. So we got all these books posted to us, physical books posted to us in the month of December, early December. And I started reading all of them one by one. So Discover Your True North, I think, is the top number one, I would say. Professor Bill George, who also taught us. So, he was a tutor. And I got the great fortune to meet him. He's also the ex-CEO of Medtronic. So he's a great personality. And that book it's basically a series of case studies of great leaders and what got them to that level. And what really touched me really is there's a whole chapter about crucibles, things that were kind of negative experiences in your life, but which actually helped you in moving forward, you
Mm-hmm.
know? Because, when you have grief, like grief is very powerful, right? It's actually I mean, for me, I mean, I lost my dad a few years ago, and for me, that's grief for me. But I think I used it in more positive way, than
Mm-hmm.
negative. It didn't break me. It did break me, kind of very temporarily, but I think it made me much stronger individual and a professional as a result of that. So that whole chapter is about how to use your crucibles. How do you use your crucibles in becoming the leader that you want to become? And the book is also very much about creating leaders. It's all about succession planning and creating, and we all know succession planning is pretty hard.
Mm-hmm.
Human beings, we love power, we love influence. It's very hard for us to give that away.
Yep.
Know what I mean? So that's the hardest thing to do, right? But there's few people who are very good at doing it because they have that abundance mindset. They want to create more leaders. They don't want to just sit there with all the power and influence in their hand. So I think that book is like amazing. It really helped me a lot, and I recommend that book to a lot of people. Most of my teams, my directs, have that book almost like as a Bible. So we've done like book clubs and things like that, or like let's say like an offsite or something where they've done that book as a pre-read. So I feel like even to build a leadership culture in an organization, I think that book is really good.
Hey, Nam, this has just been a fantastic ride. I mean, you talked about ride of a lifetime from Iger, and it's just listening to you talk and give out your thoughts in terms. It's just been fantastic. I've just taken out a bunch of notes on it, and I'll go back to your domains, right? You're a CPTO, you run a CPO track.
Yeah,
You're a mom of two kids. I don't know about strict mom or not, but you've been
not
juggling a
like my
whole.
mom.
you, you, you've been doing a phenomenal job. I mean, just hearing you speak has just been just, really great. And so, thank you for your time, and thank you for all the insights that you have. And there's a whole bunch of things, but really appreciate you being here. Look forward to seeing you sometime.
Thank you so
Thank-
much, Arjun and Gaurav, both of you. And I, formally invite you to London. You should definitely come to. We do event every month.
Yeah,
And there's so much planned actually for the next kind of 12 months. I forward plan a lot, as I said already before the pod. So it's like I already know what's in store for the next few months. So you guys should definitely come down, and I'd love to do something, in the US very soon as well.
absolutely. Thank you.